I'm delighted to introduce Dr. Harmar. He's Chief Operating Officer for Natural England. He's got a wealth of knowledge and experience, having obtained a degree and PhD in geography. He's worked in research, engineering, and for the Environment Agency. And is particularly interested in how we can use systems thinking and collaboration to tackle some of our biggest challenges, including the nature and climate crisis. And this is something that we're also very interested in at EPIC. Oliver's very passionate about the difference that education can make to life opportunity and the importance of continued learning. And as such, we're delighted that he's given his time this morning to share his knowledge and experience with us about the challenges and opportunities of implementing nature policy. Thank you, Oliver.
Thank you, and good morning, everybody. Thank you, Ruth, for that kind introduction. So some really interesting introductory comments there about EPIC. I think what I'd just say in response is that I'm talking about delivering nature recovery in all its guises today, but I am very much still learning how to do this. Translating policy into real, tangible action on the ground that delivers all the benefits that that policy was developed to do is really challenging. So I think it's brilliant that EPIC exists in this space, and I'd encourage you, please ask questions, and I'll do my best to answer those at the end. But there's lots I don't know, and I'm continually learning. So I think the importance of communities like this is absolutely vital. Thank you for the words of introduction about me. I'm going to move on to my second slide. I'll just check I can get this working. Yeah, okay. So I suspect many of you have heard about Natural England. I just thought I'd start with who are we. So I've put the broad mission there, and I'm not going to read through it, but essentially we are a national advisor to government on the environment across England. I think in truth we're much more than that, though. So advisor to national government, we also play a vital role, I hope, and I think it's an increasingly strengthening role with local government across England. We're a regulator in various guises, and I'll touch on that through the talk. We support and indeed do through our national nature reserves on the ground delivery of nature conservation and nature recovery. And I hope we play a leadership role amongst many others, trying to inspire action, bring partners together, and actually deliver real improvements on the ground, making the most of the different policy tools we've got. So that's how I'd encompass our broad roles. At the heart of it for me is about bringing together a whole range of different tools to deliver as much as possible in a particular place based on the needs of a particular community. And of course, that's across land, but we've also got a really fundamental role in the marine environment and the seas. The seas can often be forgotten, but much of our food, much of our renewable energy is based on a thriving marine ecosystem, and we play a vital role in that space too. We're currently, as many organisations do, and particularly with the new government and the refresh of the Environment Improvement Plan that's happening at the moment, we're thinking about what's our key USP over the next 5 years. And we've done a number of external workshops around that we're making sense of alongside some internal discussion. And, at its heart, I think, is some of the statements that are on the bottom of that slide. Imagine a world or a country, for example, so new housing surrounded by trees, ponds, green space. Children play, all children play in nature-rich places near to their home. Some of our beloved but very rare species fly in our skies. Our beavers help manage rivers, and our farmers grow more wildflowers. Our national parks are richer in wildlife than they currently are. Some of our really important carbon sinks, our peat bogs, our salt marshes, play the vital role they need to in terms of climate change and climate resilience. And our seas and coastline are genuinely protected through the Blue Belt scheme. I'd probably add a bullet to that, in that many communities that don't have currently good access to quality green space and quality nature close to their home, particularly sadly many disadvantaged communities, we build a natural environment that's truly for everybody. So, you know, there are some big fundamental challenges there, very much in the space of how do we work with the new government to develop new policy and build on what we've got, because we have got a whole range of new tools, but how do we genuinely deliver those kind of changes that are fundamental to our society and our well-being? Um, I think I think in our communities we often take for granted that if you ask the question why, so why recover nature, that we assume the answer is obvious. And I actually don't think we should assume that everyone can answer that question and understand what nature gives us, not just for nature's sake, but more widely too. So, I'm probably preaching to the converted here, but I just thought I'd give you some statistics just to hammer home the point. Um, so, nature underpins our life essentials, be it fresh water, be it air, be it our food. Healthier rivers, our wetlands provide the clean water for our homes, for our wildlife, and reduce the risk of flooding and drought. And two or three stats. So it's estimated that pollination carried out by bees and other insects is worth nearly £700 million to our economy through their impact on food security and other impacts in the UK each year. I mean, that is a dramatic, direct correlation between what nature does for us and our economic well-being. Nature also plays really important roles in how we relax, how we unwind as human beings, and as well as our mitigation of impacts on the planet. So our surveys, our people access to nature surveys that we do every year, routinely show that more than 90% of people find that spending time in green space has a positive impact on their mental health and their physical health, over 90%. And just turning that slightly more on the kind of economic angle, the Parks Alliance across the UK estimate that for every £1 spent in parks, that £7 of additional value is created in terms of the health and well-being impacts and the benefits to the environment. In most kind of business cases for public benefit, 7 to 1 is up there with the very best. And then when you think about climate, so our peatlands, would you believe, cover a tenth of England and lock away millions of tons of carbon in the ground when in healthy condition. And they also act as a natural water quality filter that is worth up to around £888 million a year. So these are not small numbers. These are huge numbers when you think about the impact on our economy, the impact on our health and well-being, and the impact on our future climate. Nature truly underpins our future society. I won't dwell on this slide because I suspect as a community we're well aware of the challenges, and that's why we're here delivering our professions. But I think it is worth just reflecting on the challenge nonetheless that we do face. So, I guess what I've just said is if we look after nature, nature looks after us. So it's very much it's very much a fundamental kind of balancing act. Yet, 90% of UK's wetlands have been lost in the modern era, approximately the last 150 years. 97% of lowland semi-natural grasslands have been lost in the last century. And it's estimated, and you can debate these kind of numbers about the quality evidence, but even if half this number is true, it's still quite staggering. There's 73 million fewer birds than 50 years ago in this country. You just think about those statistics, and it shows you the degree of challenge that we have. And then moving on, slightly more widely, it's estimated that through the heat waves we had in 2022, that around 3,000 excess deaths across the UK were made worse by some of our climate impacts associated with those heat waves, and that the flooding in 2023 caused farm income to drop by about a fifth. That's about a £1 billion blow to the economy. So again, not small numbers. The size of the scale of the challenge is absolutely immense. However, I came into I came into work on the environment. I spent 13 years at the Environment Agency, as Ruth said, and 3 years now at Natural England. And I'm an optimist, I'm not a pessimist. So I do start with a glass half full. And when I look at the progress we've made in terms of the tools in our toolkit that we've now got, even compared to when I joined Natural England 3 years ago, it's an impressive feat. Our job, of course, is to use those tools in places, in communities around the country to maximum effect. And it is heartening that we have policy goals, international goals secured through the COPs, and nationally ratified goals, such as 30 by 30. So 30% of land and sea managed in this country and international should be managed with nature at its heart by 2030. 2030 is not far away. It's 5.5 years. So, there is huge ambition. There's a lot of tools, but the scale of the challenge is clearly immense. I just, on this slide, just open up a little bit more about the different tools in our toolbox. So I've mentioned the fact that the government are reviewing or refreshing the Environment Improvement Plan. That was put together clearly under the last administration, and it's being refreshed in quite a pacey way. And I don't think that is about necessarily the big content of the plan. We're not expecting seismic changes in terms of how we achieve nature recovery. And I think the good news is that nature recovery will still be the kind of apex target, one of the overarching goals of the Environment Improvement Plan for this country. But the government are very focused on helping us make the right choices and strengthening the delivery pathways all the way from national policy to delivery on the ground. Thinking about what role we play, what role the Environment Agency play, what role local government play, what role community organisations play on the ground, the role of green finance in the private sector, and how that all comes together in terms of governance and leadership in a place. No small job, but that work is very much going on at the moment. If I turn to the bottom of here and then perhaps work upwards, so I would almost say the challenge for the nature conservation movement is to move away from conserving the best bits of nature that we've still got on a site-by-site basis to moving towards much more landscape scale, connected, close to where people live, coalitions to drive nature recovery. So it's got to move from conserving what we had to growing and thinking about what the opportunity is, and it's got to have people at its heart. So, if you look at the landscape scale projects and tools to do that, we've seen more strategic solutions, or what we're calling strategic solutions, such as biodiversity net gain and other tools like nutrient neutrality. And I think at their heart, and I'm delighted you're discussing biodiversity net gain later, at their heart is quite a radical proposition that we absolutely accept that we need growth in this country, we need new housing, we need industrial development. And there are often difficult choices to be made. Now, we recognise that nature underpins the economy, it's not either or. However, in certain site-based places, there will be a degree of damage. But biodiversity net gain, at its essence, is accepting some loss for much greater gain. And that greater gain needs to be looked at strategically. So it can be on site, but clearly it can be off site. And that is a fundamental change, I think, in how we thought about how we plan and deliver nature on the ground. Of course, potentially being off site means that you need a land use framework to begin to do that. And there's discussions continuing about what that might look like in the national space. But in the local space, we've got local nature recovery strategies. And for me, they should be a game changer, because in 48 geographies across the country, very much led and owned by local government. I think that's vitally important because they are the placemakers at the end of the day in the public sphere. Thinking about across a geography, where do we actually want to drive nature recovery and quality green space for people and for wildlife? And how does that sit alongside the other demands on land and the other strategic plans being developed by a combined authority, by a mayoral administration, or by unitary, or by or within, you know, an amalgamation of district councils. So we're supporting that, but clearly biodiversity net gain, a strategic tool to look in the round at where nature can be better planned and delivered, you know, has to sit as a delivery tool within a broader local nature recovery strategy. Some other tools we've got, so national nature reserves, we've got over 250 national nature reserves across the country. These are large areas of land that we are delivering pioneering nature recovery around. They are often, and in fact the majority, are delivered in partnership, including local government, including NGOs, including community groups. And as part of the King's coronation, we are delivering over the next 5 years 25 new super national nature reserves. So these are much bigger than previous. They are connecting up different habitats. They're a whole wide range from Ennerdale in the western part of the lakes to the Wigan and Lee Flashes, you know, the very suburban belt between Manchester, Liverpool and Wigan. And they're a really exciting proposition around what can be achieved when you work in partnership with all those different groups I mentioned to achieve real nature on the ground. And they should be our exemplar sites. But the critical thing is they are partnership projects convened and supported by Natural England. And then if I just mention nature towns and cities, so this is brand new and I'm lucky enough to sit on the board. This is a partnership project with Heritage Lottery Fund and National Trust. And we are working together to support local governments in providing quality green space and quality nature close to where people live, so in urban and suburban communities, particularly for those that have the poorest access for the greatest need. And sadly, that is a reality that, you know, particularly many more racially diverse communities and many disadvantaged communities on various scores have the poorest access to nature, yet the greatest potential benefits if they had better access. So that's at the heart of Nature Towns and Cities. It's a £15 million grant scheme and expressions of interest are live at the moment. What you often find through the myriad of different tools we've got, though, and I've just listed some on the right-hand side, this is a map of the Somerset moors and levels and looking west towards the Mendip Hills. And, you know, when we work in place, you know, the challenge is to think about how you pull on all those different tools, and it might be some of the grant schemes I've also mentioned, to actually drive nature recovery, you know, in that particular geography. But it's really complex because there is no right or wrong way to do it. And behind what I'm describing, you've often got skills and resilience challenges too. But I mean, in Somerset, we declared a new national nature reserve. We've declared 2 national nature reserves, actually, one in the Mendips and one on the Somerset Moors and Levels, both part of the King series. I'm now working with local partners and landowners across 60,000 hectares of land to enhance nature recovery and habitat creation. So there's vast work ongoing, but it's really complex to pull off. And that is why taking a strategic approach at different levels, led very much through the local nature recovery strategy, is so vital. And thinking about how you bring all those partners together, so we're working to one plan, and we're all clear the roles we're playing and the tools and levers that we're pulling on and the relationships that we can collectively use. And of course, the second challenge is not just to make it work in place, but across the country, if we're truly to recover nature and we're truly to make as many of our communities benefit as possible, how do we make the whole truly greater than the sum of the parts? Because it can't just be fantastic nature recovery in Somerset, or where I was yesterday in the Lower Derwent Valley near York. It's got to be a strategic approach that adds up to something that works for the wildlife and clearly works for us, you know, people and communities too. So Natural England have got this concept of a nature recovery network, you know, almost if you think of kind of a London Underground type system where there are connections between many of our different projects locally to drive up to something nationally. And I just want to go on to the kind of if you want to make nature recovery work in place, and if you want to make the whole greater than the sum of the parts nationally, what are my view and in my experience are some of the key ingredients of things that you need? So clearly, strategic alignment is really key. And if I start at the national level, I'm not going to read the words. I suspect a lot of this is going to be quite familiar to you, but it's heartening to see the government has a number of missions and DEFRA have a number of related missions, and there's clearly work ongoing around the alignment. But it's quite a different use of language. The term mission is really trying to drive integration and join up between different policy agendas. So we're not just thinking about rivers or waste or food security or nature or floods, looking at the middle box there. We are thinking about how do you develop policy that drives action in places that deliver on, either several of those or all of those. And then how do government departments work together across central government to collectively deliver on the government's bigger missions, recognizing that no one government department, no one government team can deliver any of these things at all. So I think at the moment we have an emerging but quite fresh approach, and that's very much mission-led, and at its heart is integration and collaboration. And then you're also seeing that play out in quite an organic way in different regions and different localities across the country. So I live in the north of England, and just a couple of examples from the north. So we have a pioneering partnership called Nature North. Some of you may have heard of this. This is a partnership across NGOs. It's a partnership with the Environment Agency, with ourselves, but also with heritage and culture partners, trying to identify what are the big changes we need at the northern level, and how do we link that in to the Great North, which is, if you like, the rebranding of the Northern Powerhouse, so that you haven't got economy going in one direction, environment going in another, but actually they're joined and they're integrated. And Nature North is supporting two very large regional cross-sector partnerships. One around the Northern Forest, which aims to establish 50 million trees from Liverpool to Hull. That's an estimated 7.5 million tonnes of carbon dioxide sequestered over 25 years. Yeah, not small numbers again. And is also supporting the Great North Bog, protecting upland blanket bog, so our rare and really vital peatlands, to avoid the release of around 400 million tonnes of stored carbon, leading to around 4.4 million tonnes per year of emissions avoided. Vital work, and it's recognition that you can have your approaches in Manchester and Liverpool, in Lancashire, in Yorkshire, but actually some of these environmental challenges require interventions and join up at real scale. It's not a national scale, but it's a regional scale. And what's the right leadership and governance, and how do you link that into the wider economy agenda so that it's part of one thing? And then I happen to be, if I move to my second example, I happen to be a commissioner on something called the Yorkshire and Humber Climate Commission. And this is not just looking at nature, it's looking at 4 pillars of climate action. It's looking at reducing emissions, it's looking at climate adaptation, it's looking at nature recovery, and it's looking at the really important concept of a just transition. Everyone needs to be able to benefit from the opportunities from climate action. And it's bringing together political leaders, it's bringing together different scales and sources of investment, and it's bringing together thought leaders to drive climate action at the scale of Yorkshire and the Humber. And I can pick up more if you want to in detail in the questions. I think secondly, as well as that national and regional strategic collaboration, it's really important to put people at the heart and to inspire grassroots movements across the country. So the top picture, some of you may recognise, that's a viaduct called Castlefield Viaduct, right in the heart of Manchester. And that is a temporary, if you like, pop-up nature reserve that the National Trust have created with partners on that viaduct, which is proving incredibly popular for the communities, visitors to central Manchester and its nearby suburbs. And it's a fantastic example of somewhere that you can go that is quiet and peaceful, yet in the heart of the city, to experience the benefits of nature. And it's almost bringing nature to the people rather than expecting people to travel to the nature. So it's a pioneering example and helping us think differently. And then secondly, we've got, on the other picture, we've got the England Coastal Path, which is now around 90% complete around the coast of England. We've delivered this very much through local government, with us providing facilitation and grants and national support. And it is designed at its heart to enable all people to access parts of the England coast that were previously inaccessible. And again, get outside, close to where people live, and enjoy all those different benefits. Thirdly, it's important to make it easy to do the right thing. So what do I mean by this? I think there are two elements I just want to draw on. So it's important to align our funding and incentives to actually drive the action that we want to see. So you'll be aware that since leaving the EU, one of the big choices we've had is what is the right form of agricultural subsidy reform post leaving the EU subsidy system that we're putting in place. And it's called environmental land management, ELMS. It's got 3 different tiers. It's fairly complicated, but at its heart is how do you sustain food security, but actually drive the right degree of change within the farming sector to put nature recovery at the heart of good quality food and regenerative farming. And how do we align the incentives on a habitat by habitat, but also local by local, and getting collaboration at a local level across groups of farms, not just individual farms, to work together to drive nature recovery and nature-friendly farming at scale. And then secondly, there's a role for good regulation. So I said we're a regulator earlier. We regulate activity on what's called protected sites. So SSSIs across the country, sites of special scientific interest. We also regulate the new tools like biodiversity net gain to ensure that implementation is properly applied, and there is the support to local government to help them work with developers to achieve the strategic outcomes that are driven by that new tool. Good regulation is absolutely imperative. And it's also an enabler to bring in that green finance for nature recovery, and biodiversity net gain is actually a form of green finance. And then finally, it's all about people. And one of the joys of my job recently has been to sponsor, again, with a whole range of partnership organizations, but with Natural England playing a significant role, to bring together a cross-sector leadership program around nature recovery. And you may have colleagues that are part of this. It's being trialled at the moment across the north of England and Scotland. It's being run by an organisation called Common Purpose. And at its heart is about how do we think differently to collaborate at scale and integrate different policy initiatives on the ground. And if we're able to do those things, or to enable to do those things, what are the different skills we need in each of us? And how do we need to operate differently in order to think big and to seize those opportunities and turn it into delivery? Again, I can take more questions on this if you're interested, but I think we're talking to the participants who've been through the first cohort. It feels like it's been an overriding success, and we're currently planning what more we need to do. But I think at the heart of translating policy into delivery is leadership skills and the ability to translate the national into the local, to share learning and to collaborate, and to make sure delivery is at the heart of good policy making. So I'll probably finish there. I'll just reiterate a couple of points before I open it up to questions. I mean, yes, this is a really challenging area, but it's always excited me, and I'm an optimist. I do believe we can make real progress, but there are, anxieties that live within all of us. I think it's really important to take a people-centered approach. And I think whatever organization we work in, it's really important to look outwards, to think about where we can collaborate, work differently, and empower local communities to build real momentum on the ground. So I will stop there, Ruth, and I'm happy to take questions.
Thank you very much. That was amazing. There's clearly so much going on. I was only aware of part of it, so I'm going to be making notes. I'm going to go away and read up on a few things. So we're keen to take questions. We've got 10 minutes or so. If anybody would like to put the hand up and appear on video, they will take preference over the ones that have been posted in the chat. Otherwise, we'll just go straight to the questions in the chat. I can't see anybody with the hand up. One of the first questions in the chat was from Liz Anderson. What can be done to address the serious capacity issues in the public sector, particularly in local authorities and environment agencies?
Yeah, well, it's not easy. We are, well, certainly in central government, and I suspect in local government the same, we are eagerly awaiting the outcomes of the spending review, because that sets the amount that we can clearly invest in people going forwards. I don't think we're expecting growth. I hope we're not expecting significant contraction, but I know in local governments, clearly the demand on adult and social care means that within local authorities, everything else has tended to be squeezed. For me, I think it's about how we how we continue, even though we haven't got all the resources we want, to remember that this is an attractive place to work and grow a career, and therefore inspire future generations, and think about those apprenticeship models, think about sponsoring degree courses, so there are those entry pathways for our future technical experts, our future leaders in this space. And I think, when resource is short, the importance of us getting together and sharing resources and collaborating becomes even more important. So none of us have got enough resource, but that's why I think some of getting the right leadership, and I'll talk about local nature recovery strategies, pooling our expertise together so that we are, working together around one plan and putting in place the right leadership and governance and being realistic about what we can achieve, but not seeing it as, we've only got so much resource working on the environment or working on nature. I think our challenge, and it's an opportunity really, is how we embed nature and environmental outcomes into other aspects of local government and wider work.
Yeah.
So how do we shift thinking so that our pilots on green social prescribing becomes part of the NHS and that they're willing to fund it? How do we have secondments with private industry, such as offshore wind? So I think we have to be creative as well as collaborative.
Yeah, great. Thank you. So Jacob Casson has his hand up. Jacob, would you like to ask your question? If you could turn your video and just let us know sort of your profession or your interest.
Hey there, can you hear me?
Yeah.
Sorry about that. Hey there, I have seen some depiction. And I must say I do agree with them. There was one thing I did notice, one of the pictures being in what looks like rewilding in urban areas. So I was just wondering, have you supported or done like any schemes that could have been related to rewilding in urban areas? Because honestly, I think something like that is very good, and I think we need to do more to encourage more rewilding in urban areas. So I was just wondering if you ever done anything like that.
So, I mean, I'll be honest and say rewilding is quite a loaded term. There are those that love it, and there are those that find it threatening, actually, in terms of what it might mean. I think we naturally talk about nature recovery, but to some we will mean something very similar. So I wouldn't say. I think we've seen great examples, such as, I went to Manchester a few months ago and stood on the Castlefield Viaduct, but another example is Mayfield Park, which is a quarter of a mile from Piccadilly Station, which is a brand new park with some really wild areas in the heart of a new development. with river restoration, habitat management being at its core. And it's really a brownfield regeneration project as well. So these things can be done. I think the challenge for us all is, where you haven't got the kind of significant land value uplifts, you haven't got the kind of private developer interests like in the heart of Manchester. What's the model to do this in an Oldham or Rochdale or the equivalents in Yorkshire and other parts of the country? So I think the will's there. Communities are often behind us in terms of quality green space, but how do we actually make it happen in the ground where there aren't simple investment models to follow?
Thank you very much. So we have a question from Jonathan Atkinson in the chat. What's been done about the underlying issue related to many scale projects on improving nature in rural and urban environments by having a better understanding of soil management and a national soil strategy framework?
Well, it's a great question, and we've got a soils team in Natural England. I think this goes to the heart of just sharing our data and evidence more, so that particularly local government, local authorities have access to some of the national data sets that we hold, as well as the local data sets that inevitably they hold. So I don't think there's a simple answer to that, but I was on a call around nature towns and cities yesterday, and a local authority was asking for data sets on deprivation and where is the greatest need for quality green space and quality nature. And I think that's similar to the soils ask. We sit on a lot of data as a country, but making it accessible and usable to those that most need it is a big opportunity for us.
Yeah, definitely. Thank you. We have a question from Tim. Tim Hill, if you'd like to.
Yeah, thanks very much, Ruth, and hi, Oliver. Great to see you, and thanks for that talk. It's, for those that are rest of on the call, Oliver and I go back a few years. We've been working together for years. Oliver, I'm not going to drop you into a nasty question, but I just wanted to really ask for your reflections really on how the mandatory biodiversity net gain is going so far. Obviously, we're a few months in, and only a few months in. So kind of how's it going? And have any estimates been made yet about the potential for it over, say, the next 5 years as we run up towards 2030?
Yeah, so it is early days, Tim, as we both know. Nice to see you again. So it was launched in full in April this year, and there was a softer partial launch prior to that. So it's early days. I think it's fair to say the take-up in terms of off-site biodiversity net gain hasn't been as strong as DEFRA and ourselves anticipated. But the take-up of on-site, so within development biodiversity net gain, has been very strong indeed. So we're trying to get to the bottom of what that means and update projections going forwards. Obviously, there's been a slowdown in residential developments. There's been a slowdown in granting planning. So there's a wider kind of economic context here as well. And when you look at the numbers of new homes being talked about by this new government, it is clearly very substantial and would be a significant shift. So I think it's also important that we don't read so much into the kind of first early days and project that's going to be how it's like. We are seeing a slow uptick, but I think it's early days and it's one to continue to monitor.
Thank you. I think this is going to have to be the last question, unfortunately, because it's really, really interesting. Just from the chat, from Christopher Fry, the new government wishes to build 1.5 million new homes by 2029 without the constraints for greenfield sites. Will Natural England be able to protect greenfield sites, particularly SSSIs?
So that's a really interesting question. So we clearly have a statutory role around SSSIs across England, and we sit on an amazing network of SSSIs where we are the regulator. So any actions on SSSIs do need permission from ourselves, and we also issue land management agreements on SSSIs to those landowners, and we try to make that as much a partnership as possible. In terms of greenfield and greenbelt, I mean, you'll have seen the national news stories around the government direction about looking at what they term grey belt, and I don't think there's a clear definition of what that means at the moment. I think our organisational view working with government is good nature and good development can go hand in hand. And too often they're pitted perhaps in the wider media and the wider society debate as against each other, but there are countless examples of where they can go hand in hand. So we're working behind the scenes with government on what policies might be between DEFRA and MHCLG in this space, and those conversations are very much ongoing.
Well, thank you very much, and thank you so much for the presentation, and it was really interesting. I'm just going to finish with one point that I picked up on. One of the slides that you mentioned was reviewing the delivery of environmental policy, and you mentioned the consistency of approach of delivering environmental regulation, and I'd also like to add an effective approach of delivering environmental regulation, because obviously you'd have gathered that that's what we're about.